Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. This is the bad gasket. It's got a chunk chewed out of it right here, and I cut completely through in that section. So I'm going to replace it with a piece cut from this. Now it's just slightly thinner. And I'm hoping that it's going to be thick enough to make the seal I need. Two surfaces are machined aluminum. I can't see any reason why they wouldn't work, but you know how that goes. Take the shears, cut that out rough, then come back and trim it up. It's handy having the old gasket. Why it's worthwhile to try and get it off without making too much damage. The other thing I need to go out and get that plate that fits over this. That way I can find out what those two holes do. Because even though they're in this plate, they don't have any bolts going through them. The only thing holding the plate on is these four holes here. This hole here allows the impulse from the exhaust stroke of the engine. That's when the piston's coming back out of the cylinder, and it compresses the gases in the crankcase and puts a pulse through this little port, through this fitting, down through a hose, down to the fuel pump. That causes the diaphragm on the fuel pump to move and pump fuel up into the carburetor. So I have to make sure and have that in the right spot. It's got to be on that side. This goes towards the crankcase. This side goes towards the carburetor. Now this gasket goes on this side. And you can see it clears that opening there. So I don't have to worry about any orientation on this one. And got it down there upside down. Now these two holes out here, they're not used. Just this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Everything else, not used. The soft wood lets the punch go down in and gives it a place for the punch to shove the slug into, and the gasket stays on top. That's a nice round hole. See? Easy peasy. Everything lines up right. We're all good to go. Now, seeing as how this is aluminum and fairly soft, I'm not going to start out with 80 grit on it because it'll just scour big gouges in it. I'm going to start out with a 120. Now, I'm not wishing this on you, but if you do run into a situation where you have to do this, I've got a nice piece of plate glass. Very flat, very steady, stable, no bumps or ripples in it. And I'm able to take my sandpaper and use the self-adhesive back on it and glue it to the glass. Now, if you don't have that, then you can use a table saw or anything that is flat. Try not to use anything that your wife is going to miss, but anything that is flat. And glue the sandpaper to it, and that will provide you a nice flat surface. Because remember I said if I had a surface grinder, well, this is a surface grinder, just a manual surface grinder. Nice thing is, you really have to know what you're doing with a surface grinder. Surface grinders can take off a lot of material real fast. This does a pretty good job of taking off material fast. But you screw up with a surface grinder, you'll take your part right down to the point where there's nothing left and you can't fix it without even realizing it. This is a mock-up just to make sure I got everything oriented right. I want to make sure I have that port lined up with this fitting. that hole in the gasket lines up with that hole in the plate. I can see that hole in the gasket's got to be a little bit larger. It's just a little off. Won't hurt anything to have it a little too large. It'll mess up the fuel pump if I don't have it large enough. Now we have it right. Okay. Then this goes like this. Now these two bolts are actually studs that are in the block of the engine, and these two bolts are just hex head bolts that go in through from this way, but I'm making it easier for me to do the assembly. And this goes on like that. So here we have all the pieces. We've got the inner gasket up to the crankcase. Then we have the reed valve plate. Then the gasket between the manifold and the reed valve plate. Gasket between the carburetor and the manifold. And then here's the carburetor. And it wasn't until I was sitting here doing this that I realized why this thing doesn't have an air filter. Pretty obvious once you look at it. I think it had the choke lever run straight out. That way, instead of like this, where it came out this little slot here, it would come out a slot up in here, and you'd have room to put an air filter on it. Now perhaps outboards don't need an air filter. I don't know. I would think it'd be nice to have an air filter on there just to keep bugs from flying in. You know, you got the off season and mud daubers. Especially around here in Michigan. Mud daubers find a hole like that, they'll pack it full of mud. Then you go to start in the spring, not going to work. So I think when I put this one away for the winter, I'll put a little piece of tape across the end of this port. Don't want mud daubers getting in there. Got the reed valve all assembled, and looks like everything's going to work. I just mocked it up here. I cut new gasket for the one that was torn. The back gasket's still in good shape, so I'm going to use it. No point making extra gaskets if you don't need to. And I did flatten everything out and flatten the manifold and made sure all the gasket surfaces are straight and flat and square. So it should go together just fine. I was fortunate today to go up and spend the day with my grandson. Life is too short to miss days like that. So I'm here working late at night doing this little gasket and making a video for you guys to watch. That's why I'm not putting it on the engine like I expected to today. We left at 9 o'clock this morning and got back just about 7:30. So I think that was a fair deal. He was a wonderful little boy, had a great time. And now I have an engine ready to run. Fingers crossed. Wish me luck. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching. This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union, without the express written permission of the parents or legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.